And I'm very honored now to invite our next speaker up, Geraldine Bound. Geraldine is British. She's the managing director of Domino Perspective. She's worked on women's issues, leadership development for years. I met Geraldine back in '97, a year before I started WIN, and we were at a conference together. And I was talking about this idea I had, and she and a few other people said, "Yeah, come on, Christine, do it." And I thought, "Oh, maybe I'll do it in 5 years' time." And they said to me, "No, do it now." So I'm forever thankful for that. She spoke also at her very first conference on a similar topic that she's going to talk to us about here today. And she spent the past 30 years on management consulting, a lot in areas of women's development, diversity, leadership, and spirituality. And she now provides audio and coaching programs for women online. She's a certified facilitator of SQ21, and I know you're going to tell us more about what that is. And it's a spiritual intelligence tool, assessment tool, right? And she's also a Reiki master and has been an interfaith minister as well, and a spiritual counselor for more than 16 years. Geraldine, it's an honor to have you with us.
Thanks, Christine, and good morning to you all. And I'm delighted to be back here at WIN. It's the one conference that I think, if I'm only going to go to one conference in the year, it's going to be WIN, because it's a place where women can be seen. And sometimes women in the workplace feel that they're not seen very much. So I only have 15 minutes, so I'm going to speak quickly. Okay, so the topic, spirituality at work, from emotional intelligence to spiritual intelligence. Now, I spoke on the topic spirituality at work 17 years ago, and still it seems that it's a fairly radical idea. I don't think it's radical, but in terms of workplace issues, it seems to be radical. So I'm going to talk to you about a new tool, the Spiritual Intelligence Assessment Tool, SQ21, which has identified 21 specific skills relating to spiritual intelligence. But let me backtrack first and clear up a couple of ideas about spirituality that people get very confused about. So here's the first one. Spirituality is not the same as religion. Still, people are fearful when they hear the word spirituality, especially in relation to the workplace, because they think that they're going to get some religious dogma foisted on them. They think that there's going to be some imposition of some religious principles. They are very different. Religion is a set of beliefs and usually rituals and practices based in a sacred text very often, with a community of practices to aid people in their spiritual growth. Spirituality is about our innate need as human beings to connect with something larger than ourselves. It's an individual journey to source. Now, I like to call it the journey from our ego to our best self, our higher self. And it doesn't matter to me whether we call that best self our soul, our spirit, the divine part of us, but it's that journey. People say, the longest journey is from the head to the heart. I don't think so. I think the journey, the lifelong journey, is from our ego to our higher consciousness. And spirituality can get us there. So here's the second principle. Spirituality works from the inside out. You cannot dress up in spirituality. We can sometimes dress up in values in an organization. We can pay lip service to the values. We can dress up in what we're supposed to. And people know, because they see them, they see that they're not authentic. It's not coming from the inside. We cannot do that with spirituality. It's way too obvious. And spirituality as a word has got a very bad press. Here are some of the reasons why it's got a bad press. Look at those words on the left. It's what people think about. It's wacky. It's way too airy-fairy. Oh, it's all new agey. Oh, it's all about self-blame and all about beating ourselves up. People don't like the idea because it seems to be on the edge of some kind of madness. Okay? And so people talk about it in a very elite kind of way. To start with, a lot of people who see themselves as spiritual are completely self-obsessed. They're so busy gazing at their own navels, they don't even see anybody else, never mind be able to relate to them. Or they'll talk about, well, I'm in my process. I'm just in my process. Well, you know what? We're all in process. And if you're in process, then get on with it and don't keep telling people that you're in your process, okay? Or they'll say, well, I'm just dealing with my stuff, you know. It's like, yeah, we've all to deal with stuff all the time. Don't keep reminding us. And the last one, which really gets me, I'm just speaking my truth. We should all be speaking our truth. You don't need, if you tell me you're speaking your truth, now I'm going to doubt that you are, really, because you really ought to be doing that all the time. So that's what I call dressing up in spirituality. And no, we can't do that. So let's look at the third principle. Spirituality is part of a natural progression. So we've moved from the industrial age, information age, technology age, knowledge-based age. It's time for the age of wisdom. It's time for the age of wisdom, which is going to look at all the information and intelligence we get from all our senses, and it's going to bring in the other intelligence, the intelligence that comes from our intuition, that comes seemingly out of nowhere, but we seem to get better access to it once we allow ourselves the space to open up the channel to it. So there is, I think, a natural progression. I've worked for diversity and inclusion in corporate organizations for almost 30 years, and here's what's been happening there. First, we started with equality, which was a group focus. It was looking at the legislation. It was removing barriers. It was looking at particular groups who were being discriminated against, and by the way, still are. Then we moved to diversity and inclusion. Now, this is about valuing difference, valuing uniqueness. But you know what? The more we do about appreciating the difference, the more we're actually talking about separation. The more we're talking about, because that's what makes us unique. What makes me unique, if I like to think of myself as unique, are all the things which separate me from someone else, because that's what we like about ourselves, that uniqueness. So people have said to me, so where do we go to after diversity and inclusion? Supposing we crack this diversity and inclusion, where do we go to then? At some point, we have to look at where we connect on a very deep level. We have to look at the wholeness that we are. Now, corporates, in my experience, are not quite ready for that yet. Some of them are still working on diversity and inclusion and not doing it very well either. So there's a lot of work still to be done in there. But there is going to be a natural progression. Everything that lives grows and evolves. It can't not do. Evolution will happen. So there will be that natural growth ultimately. Now, we need a new way to talk about spirituality. We need a way that's not based in any faith tradition, but not in violation of a faith tradition either. We need to extract the common themes from philosophy, psychology, from the faith traditions, from the newest scientific wisdoms and the neuroscience field, and we need something that's tangible, practical, and useful in a business setting, because we don't want people to be afraid of what is something solid. So we get rid of the myths about spirituality, and then we look at the new way. So let's remind ourselves what emotional intelligence is. A lot of people have heard of that now. If you haven't, look up Daniel Goleman. The capacity for recognizing our own feelings and those of others, for motivating ourselves, managing emotions in ourselves and in our relationships. All good stuff. When it first came out over 20 years ago, it was seen as being completely offline and off-center. And now everybody's talking about EQ and emotional intelligence. Yeah, you need IQ to get you into the job, and you need EQ to be able to do it well. Well, there's still something missing, okay? So we need to look at what I would call deep intelligence. And this is looking at integrating all the parts of ourselves. And the one that's been most frequently neglected is the spiritual part of ourselves. For some reason, I see it as the last coming out in the workplace, for people to be able to talk about spirituality, not in a condescending way, not implying that they're spiritual and no one else is, just talking about being able to access all the intelligences that they have at their disposal. It's a bit like the rooms in a house, you know. You need to air each room every day to keep them fresh. We need to air all those parts of ourselves, the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. So here's the definition of spiritual intelligence. This is from Cindy Wigglesworth, who wrote the book SQ21, SQ for spiritual intelligence. Spiritual intelligence is the ability to behave with wisdom and compassion while maintaining inner and outer peace, which we'll call equanimity, regardless of the situation. Who wouldn't want our leaders to be able to do that? Who wouldn't want everybody to be able to do that? The important words in there are behave. It's not about an idea. It's not saying, oh yes, I'm spiritually intelligent, and then behaving in a way that shows no wisdom and no compassion either. So it's the behavior that's going to be recognized. And the equanimity is important. And that's another word that's got a bad press. Equanimity is not being a robot and not having any emotions. Equanimity is not suppressing our emotions. It's not never crying or feeling upset. It's not tuning out the world, and it's certainly not acting from self-righteous certitude. So we're not talking about equanimity that denies the whole emotional side of ourselves, because now we're moving over here to be spiritual. So we'll leave all the emotions over there. We're talking about integration here. So this is what we're looking for. Wouldn't that be nice? I sometimes use this visual when I'm talking about balance for women in order to show that we don't have any. Because we all know we don't have it, right? We have compromise. What we have is changing priorities. So the whole idea of, let's talk about balance. No, let's not talk about balance. Let's talk about what's real here and about moving different ways on the seesaw whenever it's appropriate to do so and integrating our lives. Integration, I think, is a great word, and it's one that we don't do when we come to talk about ourselves. So spirituality goes further than emotional intelligence. Spiritual intelligence does, because it's got a vertical as well as a horizontal dimension to it. Now, I came across, and I think it was Brett Brown, a management report about leadership development. And it said that most leadership development programs are on what they call the vertical plane. Leaders are trained in strategy and product segmentation and cross-cultural communication and all the leadership skills that people need. What they're not doing is looking at the vertical element of the beingness of the leader. I've read for many years about what's important is the beingness of the leader, and then the leadership programs are full of strategy and marketing and all the other things that leaders need to do to inspire their teams, not looking deeply into themselves. What sustains them? Where does their authenticity come from? It doesn't come from cross-cultural communication courses. It comes from something innate in themselves. It's the connection to each other and all of life. It's the connection to the sacred and the transcendent, the divine, the timeless, the eternal. The words aren't that important. Let's talk about highest self to make sure that we don't switch anybody off. It's the highest self. It's my journey to my highest self. And if I get that bit right, then that can feed out into everything else I do. No good just concentrating on all of this and hoping that by some magical thing it's all going to work out, and then if I've got 20 minutes, I'll come and do a bit of this. We have to be doing this all the time. We have to have that connection going all the time, because that's the only way we can be sure it's going to feed out to our human lives, which are here. So, the SQ21 model provides a safe yet accurate language so we can help each other. Provides a tool to assess ourselves where you can go online and do an assessment. 21 observable and measurable skills. Finally, we can use a word like spirituality and talk about skills and competency levels. Instead of, oh yeah, well you just have to, control your ego. Oh yeah, well you just have to, be able to be a bit more centered. And, oh yes, we have to be more authentic. We do. Ask 10 people, they give you all a different definition of the word authentic. We have to do that. But here now, we've got a tool that can actually do an assessment, give you a 20-page report, and then you could have a debrief with a facilitator and look at which bits do you want to work on. Interestingly enough, all of the work I've done for 25 years in diversity and inclusion has been around building awareness about what diversity and inclusion really means. And when I came across SQ21, I thought, right, let me see if what I've been doing for the last 25 years is anywhere on this model, or have I been completely wasting my time? And I looked, and in fact, skill 1 is awareness of your own worldview. The awareness that your world is not the world, it's just your world. And skill 7, awareness of someone else's world. And there, great, that's the whole of my diversity and inclusion work, has been getting people to realize that their world is not the world, and these people have another world, and now, how are we going to make sure that we don't belittle their world because we assume our world is best and is the world, okay? And there they are, skill 1 and skill 7. You could spend a lifetime working on any one of these skills, but everybody's got their own individual journey to make, so people can choose what skills to work on. Here's an example of the SQ21 model. I'm sorry, we're going to do this a lot more in the workshop tomorrow, so I know there are a lot of words on here. So just like Daniel Goleman, there are four boxes here. So the upper left is the inner world and the inner self. And that's about being fully aware of our own nature, sensing when our ego is in charge, and hearing the voice of the higher self. Come down to the bottom, and this is how that translates out. What percentage of time is the higher self in charge? What do other people see? So across the top there, we've got the self-focus and the other focus, and down the side, we've got the inner world and the outer world. So first, we look deeply at our inner world, we look deeply at someone else's world, then we look at how we appear from that inner world out, and finally, we're talking about spiritual presence, we're talking about social mastery. Are you a calming presence for others? Can you act from compassion? Can you act from wisdom? Here's an example of the 5 competence levels. And this is the bit that we're going to do a lot of tomorrow, that journey from ego to higher self. The basic level, ego exists and is shaped by experience, going right up to ego is now in joyful service to the higher self. We don't want to get rid of the ego. We want it to be a tool of the higher self. We still have to function in this world. So, my time's up. So, principle 4, 2 more slides. Spirituality at work is not about finding a purpose and meaning in our job, but finding it in ourselves. It's about being responsible for our own evolution on all levels, being mindful of the highest good for all, and being fully human while we are doing it. And we can now understand that the fate of the soul is the fate of the social order. If the spirit within us withers, so too will all the world we build around us. The only work to do is the work inside ourselves, and we're 100% responsible for that. That is spirituality at work. Thank you.